We welcome back Ed Teja to the Mysteries to Die For stage.
I'll
Ed-
let you restart. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
Try again.
Okay.
Go for it.
Do you want to hit something on your...
No, we're going to leave that first part in. I'm going to make you do it again.
Okay. We welcome... Dude, you're up in my head.
All right, ready? Breathe. It's okay. One more shot.
We welcome Ed Teja back to the Mysteries to Die For stage. Ed has a new thriller out. Tina Clark is the world's first storefront assassin in Betrayal. Check it out on Amazon and wherever you get your online retailing books.
I'm sorry, guys. This really is a rough start today.
This is a really, really, really rough start. Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we mostly hit the right notes as we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. As we are proving, Jack and I perform these live, front to back, no breaks, no fakes, no retakes, unless the dogs bark. The rules for law and order create the boundaries for civil coexistence and, ideally, the backdrops for individuals, families, and companies to grow and thrive. Breaking these rules puts civil order at risk. And while murder is the big daddy of crimes, codified ordinances across municipal divisions, counties, states, and countries show the nearly endless ways there are to create mayhem. This season, we put our detective skills to the test in new and creative ways. Welcome to Season 8. This is Anything But Murder. For Episode 1, Suspected Arson is the featured crime. This is Who Shot Liberty's Valence by Ed Teja.
It's really weird to hear you say something different before, I'm so used to, I don't even remember what it was exactly, what you used to say last season, but you get so used to it, I was like, oh, these are new words.
I wonder how many people just fast forward through that part.
I
I heard her say this 24 times. We don't need to hear it again.
Well, at a certain point, you get really good at it. Like the flow is just, I've said this
not
15
episode
times.
1.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's so funny the way, we had a little bit of a rough start here.
Well, yeah, that's a good, hopefully that's not a good omen for season 8 here. But you know what? It's fine. It gives it character.
It does. And we're really excited about season 8. So, every season we try to challenge our writers to come up with stories around a theme that really will, engage and intrigue all of you. And, classically, when you're doing whodunits, it's about murder, but there are so many other ways to break the law. And so for this season, we're doing Anything But Murder. And Jack, I have to tell you, these are some of the most imaginative stories that we have had submitted to Mysteries to Die For.
Well, that's good. Welcome to 2025, the year of everything but murder. Well, the semi-year.
Anything but murder. No, it's a whole year.
It is a whole year?
It'll be the whole calendar year.
Wow, I can never remember how long these are anymore. I forgot that we switched so that we do really long seasons now.
We kind of do 2 half seasons.
2 half seasons. We used to do basically the half season was the full season.
Yeah.
Which is how we've only been doing this for 5 years, and we're on season 8.
Yeah. Yep.
So from now on, every season will be a year, but for a while there, I could never keep track of.
We didn't have enough stories.
That's true. We basically just did chapters of a book for the first season, and the second season, I don't even remember.
We did adaptations for the first 2.
Second and third.
I found it really, I guess interesting is the right word, that when we released the authors from the confines of murder, that their imagination seemed even freer to play in the mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the stuff, it's maybe not as hardcore because, it's not murder, but they're just fun stories.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because most of our, we've never done a you have to do murder
We
season.
never have.
Yet it's most of what we get. So I think freeing everybody, hopefully in future seasons, we'll tell them, hey, you don't got to stick to murder, though. Just because maybe this is going to be the anything but murder. And then from now on, it'll be just murder all over again. It was like, we can't do anything. We can't do oh my God, Jack, speak a word, please. We can't do an episode that, isn't murder. It doesn't belong in this season.
It's not called Murders to Die For. It's Mysteries to Die For.
Well, you wouldn't imagine it. You wouldn't guess it.
I will brief everybody with one caveat, and I'll do this hopefully for the next couple of episodes, and that is we're still following the whodunit format.
Yes.
Which makes it a little bit tricky when we get to the deliberation, because you're going to be asked a question, but it is not going to be, who killed so-and-so. It may be, this is an arson story, so it may be who set the fire, who stole the painting. There's going to be some question that you're challenged to solve, but it's going to have just a little bit of different flavor since, there's no murder.
And that was, I think, the hard part for the authors, because for the first time, you got to actually craft the question. You've never had to craft a question. It's always, who's the murderer? And now it's, well, who did this other crime? Or maybe it's obvious who did the crime, and you got to figure this or that out. So, yeah, it'll be fun to see what everyone came up with this year.
All right. Well, let's jump into Who Shot Liberty's Valence by Ed Teja with Chapter 1. Remote work.
All right, we got to pick. I was told to pick an techno.
Well, this is like, high-tech medical scene.
I see. Kind of.
You have anything that's, antiseptic?
Antiseptic?
I don't know. It is set in New Mexico, if that inspires you any further.
Sure.
That sounded very 1980s to me.
I don't know. You said New Mexico. I thought the Eagles, but I'm pretty sure they were from Arizona.
I don't know.
I could be totally wrong on all that anyway. All right, I'm going to shut up. This is what we're using.
This is what we're using.
Galaxia EP.
Galaxy?
No?
No?
Galaxia. Galaxia
Okay.
EP. I'll shut up. Bye-bye.
I don't know why I doubted him. Remote work. I didn't notice that dawn was turning the horizon over New Mexico's Black Range a lovely salmon pink until Harry Watson mentioned it. As I got into his car, he pointed his thick index finger east through the windshield and said, "That's one amazing sky, Matt." I took a quick look, then turned my attention back to where it belonged, on the coffee and donuts he brought. At my insistence. If it isn't clear, I don't do mornings well. The day before, Harry had shown up unexpectedly. He'd driven to Silver City all the way from Albuquerque, had taken me to dinner, and, over Mexican food, told me he wanted me to run an investigation for him. We had worked together at a big investigation agency in Santa Fe once. Then I went solo and he went corporate, working for an insurance company running in-house investigations. Now he wanted me on an arson case. A lab had been torched. "Why hire me?" I asked. "Your company insured the lab and someone set it on fire. The arson squad will tell you all there is to know." Harry wiped the hot sauce from his chin. "Not everything we need to know, however. The situation is screwy, and investigating the screwy has always been Matt Kramer's specialty." Well, I couldn't argue with that. "And you want an independent investigator in case your client doesn't like what you find out?" Harry shrugged. "Well, the policyholder, Liberty Pharma, is a really big client." Well, I'd heard of them. One of the fastest growing pharmaceutical companies on our shrinking planet. Clearly, Harry's problem went beyond the fire, and the investigation was urgent. That's why I was here, making an early start on a long drive to visit the crime scene. I sipped the hot elixir, black Americano coffee, and stared out the window, half seeing the high desert scenery rushing by and wondering what Harry's world was like, investigating on a salary for a big company. I also wondered where the hell we were going. Rural New Mexico doesn't have that many roads, and once we left Deming, heading south, I needed to ask, "Are you planning to cross into Mexico? I didn't bring my passport." That earned me a laugh. "No, not all the way to Mexico, amigo. It's not far now." It couldn't be. "Why did Liberty stick the lab way down here? It sure wasn't because of the big worker pool." Harry nodded. "The lab doesn't belong to Liberty. Technically, it's leased by Valence Tech. That's a small research company formed by Paul Larson, one of Liberty's researchers. He had a line on some new vaccine, but the company thought it was a long shot." "What kind of vaccine?" I asked. Harry gave me a quizzical look. "You think I know from vaccines? A shop that keeps you from catching something." There was nothing in that for me. We passed a mobile home someone had stuck out in the middle of some barren desert. Not a tree in sight, but a brand new Toyota was parked in front. "Welcome to New Mexico." "Tell me about the long shot vaccine," I said. Harry tapped the steering wheel as he drove. "This Larson came across a research paper and decided the researcher, Randy Klein, was onto something. Company didn't agree. Larson convinced an investment manager named Alexis Holder to line up money to fund the project, though. So Liberty agreed to give Larson a sabbatical and let his startup work under the umbrella of the company, using their suppliers and financial leverage." "Why would Liberty do all that?" I asked, feeling I was missing something. Harry rubbed his finger and thumb together. "Money. This deal kept them in the game and limited their downside. They put up no cash, but if the vaccine works, Liberty buys the whole operation for a tidy sum." All right, I could see that. They really couldn't lose. Valence Tech was set on leasing some buildings out here, but they needed to insure them. After some arm twisting, Liberty convinced my company to cover it under their umbrella policy. That might have been a bad call. The payout on the equipment alone would be in the millions, not to mention damage to the actual property. Now, because a crime is involved, and because the arrangement might not be kosher, well, the insurance regulators might think we didn't do our due diligence. My bosses want an independent investigation. They need to show we aren't hiding anything. Harry pointed at me and grinned. "In case you haven't guessed, that's you." "Did it work?" I asked. Harry took his eyes off the room long enough to give me another puzzled look. "What?" "The vaccine, Harry. Did it work?" Harry laughed. "The fucking lab burned down, Matt." "I got that," I said. "Someone deliberately destroyed a long-shot lab parked halfway in the Sonora Desert." Harry held up 2 fingers. "This location offers twin virtues of low cost and privacy. It's part of an old air park that had been unused since the DEA busted whoever used to own it for smuggling drugs." "Low cost I get," I said, "but the need for privacy?" "Sure, if the vaccine works," he said. "It could become valuable intellectual property, a proprietary vaccine or something they sit on." That surprised me. "They spend time and money to discover something and then sit on it?" Harry chuckled at the idea. "To keep a competitor from making it. They don't want anyone offering a cheaper alternative to existing products." Once again, I found the ways big money was made puzzling. The air park turned out to be a bigger complex than I imagined. I'd driven past it a dozen times, but usually with visions of cold margaritas awaiting me across the border dancing in my head. I didn't notice a cluster of buildings tucked off to the side of the road that, at a glance, looked more like an abandoned mall or private school. Except for the wall around it and the airplane, of course, even though the airplane wasn't real. It was a statue, a biplane mounted on a large pedestal alongside what had been a runway. When Harry drove through the gate, I rolled down my window, wanting a first impression that wasn't filtered by the tinted window. What I got was the acrid stink of smoke and melted plastic. The unburned brick buildings were attractive enough, and certainly more sensible than metal Quonset huts would be under the desert sun. But the one covered in soot that Harry drove toward was a mess. Pools of suspiciously murky, stinky liquid had the allure of tar pits. All the windows and doors were smashed in, or out. The entire area was a mess of charred materials and everything was draped in a lifetime supply of crinkled yellow police tape. As Harry parked the car, I pointed at the crime tape. Is that a problem? Cops don't like anyone poking around crime scenes. No, the arson squad finished their work. He looked at me. They actually had a suspect for a time. He smiled at me as I started to speak and cut me off. I'll let the sheriff explain. With me in his wake, Harry strode toward an unburnt building near the lab, waving a hand like a tour guide. I asked all the important players to meet us in the office. He stopped and looked at me. The local sheriff, Willa Parker, she needs some tender loving care. She isn't happy about us running the investigation, but she is cooperating. Be nice to her. I stepped around the undoubtedly toxic and obviously putrid puddle and sighed. It promised to be a long day.
Quite the mystical start.
I always like his are always set in New Mexico, even
Yeah.
though Ed has traveled and lived all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a part of the country that I really haven't had much exposure to. So I always feel like he brings a little bit of New Mexico to us and to everyone.
I always think about how huge the U.S. is when it's like, we have swamps, we have deserts, we have places that are in snow all the time. Like, we kind of got it all here. You don't realize how large we are.
Just living in our little corner.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, new chord progression, fellas. Let's figure it out.
Meeting the suspects in a new chord progression. When we walked in with Harry introducing us, Sheriff Parker gave me a sharp-eyed, suspicious, and appraising look. I forced my best smile onto my face. Thank you for being here, Sheriff. She grimaced. Wouldn't miss it for the world, she said. I'm sure she scored well on the sarcasm test all rural sheriffs have to pass. I cut to the chase. I understand you had a suspect. Her lips twisted. Yeah, I gotta say things looked pretty open and shut for a minute or two there. When the fire broke out, Paul Larson left the office and found Randy Klein dragging one Josh Walker out of the lab. Harry nodded. Walker, he belongs to an anti-vaccine group and exposes conspiracies. The sheriff's eyes sparkled. He broke into the lab and, when the place went up, he was making a video of himself going through the place, showing what a clever asshole he is. I laughed. I'm guessing his video exonerated him? She grinned. It shows the fire starting in another part of the building. He nearly went into shock as it spread like crazy. Accelerant, the arson kid said. It set off an explosion. Ironically, the fool has Larson and Klein to thank for making it out alive. A piece of the building smacked him in the head. Is he all right? I asked. She grinned again. I'm not sure he ever was. He's in the hospital in Deming under police guard. I raised an eyebrow at the apparent contradiction, but you said he isn't a suspect. Not for arson. She showed me nice teeth. I'm charging him with criminal trespass. Slam dunk on that one. Having him available as a witness certainly made my life easier. I'll need to talk with him. No problem. I'll put you on the access list. She pointed to an envelope sitting on the desk. I brought you a copy of his statement and one of the video he made. I also included the witness statements and the arson report. Oh, I liked her. Excellent, I said. Reluctant, she said. Harry asked me to let you do the investigation on behalf of the insurance folks. If I had the manpower, I'd insist we do it ourselves. But I'm undermanned, over budget, and tired. Since it's only property damage. I understood. She had bigger fish to fry. Harry insisted I keep you in the loop, Sheriff. Harry smiled his appreciation and introduced me to the others. Paul Larson. Now he was a smallish, fidgety man with watery blue eyes that darted around, seldom fixing on anything. Alexa Holder. The woman represented the investors. She was well-dressed in her 40s and had a sharp, thin face. Something about her made me peg her as a smoker. That wasn't relevant, but guessing things like that is something I do. A thin man sat in a chair in a corner looking sad and bored. This was Randy Klein. Randy was the principal researcher, Paul said. He has the brains behind the vaccine idea. How many people were working with you? I asked. Randy Klein looked shocked and then he laughed. Just me and Paul. The last was grudging. That surprised me. All by yourselves? Paul waved a hand. Sounds crazy, but with all the expensive gear we had to buy for the project comes the benefit that most of the real work is automated. We have, he let out a sad sigh, we had a machine that synthesized the vaccines, another that cultivated the pathogens, so many fucking machines I can't remember them all. Randy and I set up the test and supervised the machines. Randy glanced at Paul with a near sneer. When we started, we had an assistant who took care of the lab rats. Well, that caught my attention. Had? She got a better job, he continued to glare at Paul. Working at a call center in Deming probably pays better. I clucked as sympathetically as I could. Did she leave with a chip on her shoulder? Randy shook his head. Dear Leslie left with a sparkle in her eye and a skip in her step. I looked at Paul. I'll need her contact information. She had to be a suspect. When he nodded, I looked out the window. I could see the charred lab. So you and Randy rescued this Walker guy? They nodded. Who else was here? Alexa's face tightened. Just me, she said. Are you here often? I asked. She twisted her mouth. No, just when there's a crisis. She laughed at the look I gave her. It's ironic. Paul called a meeting because Liberty was shutting us down. Oh, Paul shot her a hard, disapproving look. The CEO wanted to end the deal. He said we needed to show them that the vaccine was nearly ready, or we were done. Alexa wiped a hand across her face. And it isn't, which meant he was pulling the plug. Harry was right about this sounding iffy. I turned to Paul. So what was your deal? A scheduled buyout for a little assistance, he said. Liberty wanted to have a toe in the water with this vaccine. Alexa smiled at me as if I were a slow child. It was simple. If we got results, they paid us a premium on what we invested along with some stock in Liberty. If we ran out of money or gave up, they washed their hands of the deal and the public never knew they had a research failure. So why would they cancel? I asked. Paul turned toward me. One of their fucking lawyers decided the arrangement wasn't kosher and might constitute insider trading. I considered the legal exposure. Would that make it in Liberty's best interest to torch the lab? Paul and Alexa burst out laughing. They wanted the vaccine desperately, Paul said. They already trademarked the name, Liberty's Valence vaccine. Alexa waved a hand. A competitor would be a more likely suspect. This was groundbreaking work, Randy said, but we needed more time for testing and to iron out a few wrinkles. Alexa slumped. Liberty backing out screwed our arrangement with investors, so we needed to find new ones. Paul, he paced the floor, wringing his hands. We weren't going to give up. If that was an option that made sense. Give me a quick timeline of what happened after the meeting. Paul folded his arms and then unfolded them. Well, Randy headed back to the lab. To grab the latest test results, Randy said. We were going to use them to put together an updated proposal for investors. Alexa nodded, which meant I had work to do before we headed out to my plane. Plane? I asked. Paul nodded. She's a private pilot. She pursed her lips. After Randy left, Paul and I discussed a couple of details. Then he left to help Randy salvage what he could while I started making appointments. You called Liberty's competitors, I asked. She smiled. I started calling anyone and everyone who might want to invest in a trivalent vaccine. Then I headed for the plane. That's when I saw the lab was on fire. Paul and Randy were dragging this man across the parking lot. I nodded toward Randy Klein. Was the lab locked when you came to the meeting? He nodded. The sheriff raised a finger. Walker used a crowbar to break a window and pry open a door. She nodded at the window. He entered on the far side of the building. And there was an explosion, I asked. Paul Larson waved his hands, more of a whooshing sound. I was going down the stairs and barely heard it, but it did the job. The building and all of our equipment was toast. It did indeed do the job. Will you use the insurance money to restart? Alexa pouted. The policy on the building pays out to the owner, she said, her voice a bit raspy. We'll get something for the equipment, but all the time and the research is lost. We'll need to pretty much start from scratch. Sheriff Parker got up and stretched. Well, I'm going home. She handed me her card. I'll hold you to that promise of keeping me informed. Then she sauntered out, leaving me alone with 3 suspects and my client.
That takes a special kind of police officer to just be like, well, one of you probably lit the thing on fire, but, I got better things to do. See ya.
Well, she's got a whole county, and, she's probably got a couple people. And like she said, it was only property damage.
It was only property damage. It was only a fire that could have killed a guy.
But didn't.
The thing is could it be considered...
It's anything but murder.
I know, but the official charge, the guy who did it could be can you be charged for endangering people's lives? Probably. I don't know what it's called, but still, I think that's one ballsy sheriff just to be like, okay, bye.
It works for our story.
Yeah, movie magic.
Movie magic. That's not murder magic, mystery magic.
Aha. Almost murder magic.
Almost murder magic. This
is going to be a rough season, guys. We can't even get through our heads that we're not killing people.
It's going to take a couple episodes before we really believe that nobody is going to die in an episode.
Well, people will die in some episodes. It just won't be the reason.
Only the ones with Detective Conley.
Really? Are there no deaths in any of the other ones? I know we haven't gotten all of them in yet, but...
So far, no deaths.
Really?
Yeah.
I could have sworn there'd be a death and Well, don't worry. I'll fix that. I have a good idea for what I'm going to do for detective, I have to start writing sooner or later. Anyway, all right, I'll shut up.
Sugar shots. I couldn't think of any more questions for Alexa and Paul. I had their statements, so I let them head off in her plane to peddle the project. When they left, I turned to Randy. Tell me, what is so special about your vaccine? His eyes flickered, and I knew this was what he loved. It's revolutionary, magically trivalent. I gave him a hard look. In English, explanations challenged him, so he sighed. A vaccine's valence represents its ability to deal with a particular pathogen. This one inoculates a person against 3 different strains of flu. It's trivalent. And it worked? I asked again. Randy's smile was wistful. Yes, but the process of proving its efficacy gives the bean counters nightmares. They get upset when you can't force a lab rat to show flu symptoms faster or to recover more quickly. Side effects take time to manifest, and then it takes more time to evaluate them. Even though we've had brilliant results, the regulatory agencies demand endless testing before we can go to the next level. You must give these rats lots of shots? The idea made me cringe. He shook his head. No, it's delivered on sugar cubes. One of the machines produces an appropriate drops and codes them, so even we don't know which is which. They look and smell identical, he grinned. Scientific method and all of that. I could see that. But what makes a drop appropriate? He rolled his eyes. The content? One might be just the vaccine. Another combines the vaccine and one pathogen. The next would be the vaccine and a second pathogen, and so on. Some rats get a drop that is nothing but food coloring. That's the control group. I followed his process, and then you have to wait and see what happens? Pretty much. He held out his hands. And then you do it again. What happens now? I asked. Randy rolled his eyes. Unless Alexa moves fast, I need to start job hunting. If you're done with me, I'm going to see if I can salvage anything more. Sure, I said. Thanks for your time. As Randy left, I scooped up the materials the sheriff left for me. Harry nodded toward the door. Let's get back to your place, he said. We can look through that stuff together. I want to see the video Walker made of his exploration of the evil lair of the vaccine makers. I gave him a curious look. Why do you care? You know the fire was arson. Doesn't that let your company off the hook? He touched his nose. This peculiar deal has my boss wanting to know exactly who did what to whom. Property damage is one thing. Words like arson and fraud, those worry him. Fraud? I asked. Harry grinned. Some of the lawyers worry that whoever set the fire had a reason for doing it. Our relationship with Liberty is complex and involves other policies. My boss wants to get ahead of things and is willing to pay you to determine what was going on. When we got to the car, I stopped. It'll be well past lunchtime by the time we get back. Harry considered it. We can stop and grab a pizza and beer to take to your place. The company would consider it a reasonable expense. I could go along with being a reasonable guy. Too bad it's so far, he said. We could invite Sheriff Parker to join us. I let that go and walked over to Harry's car. I stared out across the high desert while he drove us back into the mountains and Silver City. A day in Deming. The next day, Harry flew to Albuquerque to brief his boss while I kept working. It took a few calls to locate Leslie Ellis, the former research assistant. She was working in a veterinary clinic in Deming doing pretty much what she had done at the lab, taking care of critters. I needed to make a couple extra stops in Deming, so I made the hour drive down and met her at a coffee shop. Hearing about the lab fire didn't upset her. When I asked why she left her job, her answer surprised me. It was because of the lab animals. I'm sure Randy explained the concept of pathogen valence, she said, but I bet he didn't mention the psychological valence. Okay, that was a new one. Psychological, I asked. Psychologists use valence as a measure of instinctive response to things, say, a smell. We have an immediate emotional reaction. If the smell of mint attracts us, that's a positive valence. If we're repelled by it, that's a negative valence. The test animals seem to have a huge positive valence for the vaccine. I blinked, trying to decipher what she was telling me. Is that bad? She nodded. It was in this case. The poor creatures were going crazy. I've never seen rats so eager to get to sugar cubes. Their behavior was getting abnormal. When I asked Randy to conduct tests to see what was going on, he told me to mind my own business. And you quit? That seemed like an overreaction to me. She wiped her hands on her lab coat. I got the message. He didn't want to know if his vaccine was addictive. Addictive? Definitely not a good valence. She folded her hands and stared levelly. That's sure what it looked like to me. I've read about the opioid mess Big Pharma made. She paused. I didn't want to be part of the next health crisis. Well, did you mention your concern to anyone else? She sucked on her lower lip. Yes, to Paul and Alexa. Paul said any serious issues would come up in testing. Sounded like it was coming up in testing, if Leslie was right. And you quit? I asked again. She shrugged. The job didn't pay much, and I hated the commute. Ethics are complicated. You don't care if they create an addictive vaccine as long as you weren't involved? Well, she hesitated, and I saw it in her eyes. You contacted Josh Walker about research. How else would he find out about it? She started to deny it, but gave up the attempt. People have a right to know. Why not tell them yourself, I asked. She bit her lip again. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Josh said he'd do his own investigation, which seemed to mean breaking into the lab. And he'd write an expose? He does videos, she said. He's an influencer. I'd seen his channel. Self-righteous ass was a better term. Back in my car, my next stop was Alexa Holder's office in Deming. I called before I left Silver, and she'd flown back that morning. I was surprised to see she worked out of a small storefront office, but what do you need to make phone calls? I got out of my car and found her in the parking lot, smoking. At least I'd gotten that much right. She didn't remember talking to Leslie at all. Are you saying she's lying? I asked. Alexa shook her head, scattering ash. Hell no. I don't remember is all. She's a tech type, a nerd. We don't speak the same language. She went off on me a couple times about ethical protocols or something or other, and I tuned her out. I was busy with finances. I could see that about her. Then you had no idea the vaccine might be addictive? Addictive, she said, laughing. Was Randy's magic ingredient heroin? Doesn't need to be that, apparently. After all, you can get addicted to lots of things, I said. Even to sugar. She waved her cigarette, blowing the cloud of smoke in my direction. Tell me about it. Her solution was learning to live with addiction. Mine was to leave. I drove to the hospital where a friendly and bored cop found my name on the list that let me in to see Josh Walker. I also learned that she was, unfortunately, happily married. Walker lay in a bed, peering out through a mask of gauze, nearly as bored as the cop. He was happy to bend my ear with pretty much the same story Leslie had told. She found him online, emailed him her concerns and some test results. He coughed. From the stuff she sent, I couldn't make out what was being tested, he said, clearing his throat repeatedly. But it was a vaccine and worth flying out to do some investigating reporting. That's what he called it. I held up a thumb drive. In this video, you focused a lot on the lab equipment. The video made a slow pan across the impressive array of stainless steel machinery, pausing for a close-up of an equipment plate that gave the manufacturer, model number, and so on. Then Walker made a curious on-camera comment. Never heard of them. At that point, he was interrupted by unexpected flames and lots of running. I could make out a triumphant smile under the gauze, a smile he immediately regretted. I could tell the gear was wrong, he said. I was going to follow up. I would have edited that part out before posting the video. I had done the research he planned to do. A few minutes online determined that the machine came from an El Paso company and was designed to put a precise amount of mustard and mayonnaise in processed foods. The manufacturer didn't say anything about vaccines. I smiled at him. And you were going to edit that part out? Assuming Valence Tech paid you for that consideration, of course. Well, I must have offended him because suddenly Walker didn't have much more to say, other than mentioning the lawsuit his lawyer was filing against Valence Tech LLC for his injuries. I didn't care. On the drive home, I listened to a CD of Chet Baker playing with Jerry Mulligan. The cool jazz pushed the petty shit out of my mind and let my unconscious sift through it. I learned a lot on my day in Deming. I had a few reasons for setting the fire percolating in my head, but I still didn't know who set the fire. Maybe I wasn't asking the right questions. It was like doing research, I guess. How many appropriate sugar cubes did it take to get to the right answer? If they did as many tests as Randy suggested, investigating my spare change in sugar sounded good. That was about as clever as insightful as my ideas got that day, and it brought me no closer to an answer to the question Harry needed an answer to. Who shot Liberty Valence's vaccine? Because it seemed to be dead on arrival. Review. With Harry due back, I spent the next day reviewing the materials Sheriff Willa Parker had provided. I even transcribed Josh Walker's video, wanting to fix his observations in my head. Ever since Sherlock Holmes showed up, people seem to think detectives simply follow one clue to the next to find the culprit. That doesn't describe my work. I look more like a man rushing through a forest turning over random rocks. Lots of rocks. I went to my whiteboard and drew a rough diagram of the compound and marked the spot where Walker had entered and where they found him. He only deserved a couple of smudges. but I used colors to track the movements of the key actors on the fire that day. Paul Larson in green, Alexa Holder in blue, and Randy Klein in red intersected in the office, spread out, and connected again at Walker's exit smudge. Investigative work is often not pretty, and the results on my whiteboard were definitely ugly. It was supposed to be a framework for the events, a visual aid that I could stare at while drinking a cold beer. Oh, the lengths we go to in accumulating billable hours. The arson report suggested that the miscreant, they actually used that word, placed a number of containers of accelerant at key points throughout the lab. With it set up that way, they could waltz in, strike a match, and count on nearly total destruction. I wondered if Walker had startled the person planning the fire. Would his arrival have forced them to delay things until after the meeting? Or was that the original intention? Standing amid the morass that was my office and my whiteboard, I considered the attitudes of my suspects. I thought about where each were at the time, and I speculated wildly about what each of them might have to gain by burning the lab. Or what the fire would hide beyond the bogus lab equipment. I was reviewing those critical factors when Harry showed up and gave me my marching orders. Sheriff Parker asked us for a face-to-face meeting, he said, for an update on anything and everything, as she put it. She wants us to drop by her house tomorrow morning for coffee. A morning meeting, naturally. What did Harry see in her? I looked at my whiteboard and he rubbed his jaw. Confusion was contagious. I pointed at my masterpiece. The old adage says follow the money, and I've been trying to see where and how anyone profited from burning down the damn lab, and it's clear as mud. Leaving Harry squinting at my nearly incomprehensible mess, I got him a beer, and he took a sip. The insurance payout won't make any of them a dime, he said. As far as I can see, all our suspects are going to be out of the money they've spent running it for months, paying salaries to Randy and the lab assistant, the consumables, like sugar cubes, I said. Harry liked that. Exactly. Sugar cubes and whatever pathogens cost these days. That's all money down the tubes. Where else is there any profit? I waved the screenshot I'd taken from Walker's video. Scamming investors, perhaps? How is that? He asked. I cut the mustard and explained. All the money that was allegedly being spent on state-of-the-art lab equipment went for a few show-and-tell machines. It didn't cost them a fraction of what they claimed. Worse, they can't have been doing any research with them. Harry rolled his eyes. That means both Larson and Klein are in on the scam. We don't know about Holder. She might have not have known a thing. I agreed. There could be more skimming as well, I said. We would need to see the account books. I stared longer at my whiteboard, pretending it was telling me something useful. You know, in a movie, the investigators would have an office of people running extensive background checks on everyone. We'd have their bank records and credit scores and mothers' maiden names by morning. Ah, yes, Harry said, along with the discovery that the competitor of Liberty made massive deposits in a suspicious Cayman Islands bank account. He was getting into the spirit of things. He also had a point. A competitor might want this stopped enough to offer one of this crew a payday to burn the lab. Harry puckered his lips. Enough to make them want to end the scam? They didn't know it was a scam, I said. Harry tossed the now empty can into the plastic trash can and wiped his lips. I'll come around about 7 in the morning. We'll meander south and present these exciting insights to Willa. Why so early? I groused. He grinned. Because the meeting is at 9, and Sheriff Parker lives in Columbus. That was the far side of the airfield. I groaned. Of course she does. She promised to make good coffee, he said. I walked him to the door. 7, huh? It better be fucking great coffee. When Harry left, I went back to my whiteboard and resumed my very professional staring. I'm good at staring. A Breakfast in Columbus. Sheriff Willa Parker had a small adobe house on the back street in Columbus, New Mexico. Columbus is best known for being the place that Pancho Villa raided in 1916. The Mexican bandit led 1,500 riders up from Palomas, Mexico, and burned Columbus. The 13th Cavalry responded and drove him back to Mexico. Not much has happened here since, until that morning. Sheriff Willa Parker met us wearing jeans, a work shirt, and a smile that seemed to make her glad to see us. She sat us around her oak table in an old-fashioned kitchen and poured coffee. "I just wanted an informal chat," she said. The chocolatey smell filled the place, blending perfectly with great coffee smells. My husband made brownies, she told my twitching nose, and put a large, juicy brownie for each of us. Brains work better with a little sugar rush, or so he claims. "Sounds like a smart guy," I said. That pleased her. "He heads up my secret interrogation unit, so you better talk." We led her through the mess, all the way through the exciting conclusions we'd arrived at the day before. Hearing it out loud in the morning light made it seem even less insightful than it had over beer. Not that we thought we'd pierced any veil of darkness even then. Willa Parker was almost pleased as we'd been, which was not very. She looked at me. "What else do you got?" "Not much," I said, my words coming out around the rich brownie. All our suspects seemed invested in keeping the research going, and when the fire started, none of them knew Walker was investigating them. Without the threat that he would expose a fraud, there was no reason for the fire. Sheriff Parker sipped the coffee from a big white mug, and the wheels were turning in her head. Harry nodded. If Alexa and Paul had their hearts set on moving their scam to new investors, they'd want the stuff intact, assets on the books. Whether the new money came from a competitor or someone else, having everything in place would be an incentive. And Randy, he would want to keep them going. He lit up about the science, I said. He must have been getting a salary and part of the scam. And he owes Larson. No one else was interested in the work. "I wonder why that was," Willa Parker asked. "Is it possible that it never had any potential to make a vaccine and was only useful as a money-making scheme?" I had considered that. Even if true, that doesn't change much. She cocked her head. "In my experience, greed can work in subtle ways." Harry laughed. "Not much subtle about that fire." She nodded. "And yet, 3 clever minds are sitting here trying to puzzle it out. That seems pretty subtle." She had a point. Willa Parker sat back in her chair, taking it in. "We don't know the details of the deal. Maybe it required them to show Liberty how far they got. Maybe they had the option to take it in-house for less money." I held out my hands. "I have no idea." Willa stood up. "Well, while you two were on the way here, I arranged for our trio from Valence Tech to meet us at their office. Why don't we drive up there and see if they won't work a little harder to help us understand what really happened and why? I think they owe us that much." I looked to the stack of brownies sitting on the counter. "You know, I think they might tell us." She narrowed her eyes. "You have a hunch?" "I do," I said. "Don't jinx it by making me say it out loud, though." "I would do something like that to a scientific investigative hunch," she said. She got another brownie. "An investigator has to keep up his strength, and I want to just see how professional detective follows a hunch." Harry nodded. "Me too." And so we went off. All right, Jack, we are to the first deliberation of season 8.
Alrighty.
All right, so private investigator Matt Kramer is on a hot case, doing a solid for his buddy Harry and his insurance company on an arson case. Matt knows it's somebody in the lab with an accelerant and fire. He needs our help with the somebody part. Here is his shallow suspect pool in the order that we met them.
Okay.
All right, Paul Larson,
Yeah.
former Liberty researcher turned entrepreneur with Valence Tech. Alexa Holder, investment manager who is reeling in the investors.
All right.
Randy Klein, vaccine researcher whose work on Valence Tech is solid.
His work is solid. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know what I meant. I actually wrote something different. I'm like, not sure that makes sense. We're going to we're going to fix that for the anthology. Highlight that in yellow.
Cool. So now that his work is nice and not liquid. Actually, no, it should be liquid if it's a vaccine.
If it is a vaccine.
It's an issue. It's an issue.
Leslie Ellis, former assistant who mistrusted the group's ethics.
Okay.
Josh Walker, influencer and anti-vaxxer who was looking for a conspiracy.
Gotta hate the anti-vaxxers.
Okay, so those are our 5 suspects. Paul Larson, Alexa Holder, Randy Klein, Leslie Ellis, Josh Walker. All right, here's what we know.
All right.
Paul Larson started Valence Tech based on Randy Klein's research and talked his employer, Liberty, into an arrangement for the development of the vaccine. Liberty provided the insurance, some logistics assistance, and an arranged buyout if the vaccine proved successful, but no money. That was Alexa's job.
Okay.
A Liberty attorney, uncomfortable with the deal, forced corporate to ask Paul for proof of the vaccine's promise on the threat of shutting the project down.
Who did that?
A no-named attorney for
no-named
Liberty.
Attorney from Liberty.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so Paul was the one being pressured.
So Paul was getting pressured to show results for a fraud scam that he's running.
Yes.
Okay.
Leslie Ellis suspected the vaccine had addictive properties. She told the others, and when she was told to mind her own business, she quit.
Okay.
Josh Walker was the anti-vaxxer activist Leslie unofficially told. He was conducting his own investigation and found suspicious equipment in the lab.
And he knew it was suspicious, but he didn't find out that the equipment was suspicious until after basically the accelerant and the fire had been started.
Right, because basically
he found out simultaneously, basically.
Because Matt had done the legwork on the research.
Yes.
So Matt followed up on the equipment and found that it was manufactured in El Paso, not Switzerland, and for condiments, not pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Okay.
The fire started shortly after the meeting where Paul told Alexa and Randy about Liberty's ultimatum. Alexa worked and then went to her private plane from which she saw the building on fire.
So, okay, we'll keep going before I ask more questions.
Paul remained in the complex. Randy went to his computer to download the data to be used in the new investor prospectus that Alexa was creating.
Interesting.
Leslie was not seen on the campus the day of the fire.
Leslie? Who was Leslie again?
She's the lab rat manager.
The one who quit?
The one who quit.
Correct. Okay.
So, remember, she's working in Deming at a vet.
That's right.
So, we have no conversation about her being there that day.
Okay.
Walker recorded himself in the lab, which showed the fire entered the room and continued to spread. Walker tried to run out of the lab, but was struck by falling debris. Randy found him at the bottom of the stairs and was carrying him out when Paul joined him. The insurance would pay the owner for the damage to the buildings and Valence Tech for the loss of equipment, and that should have eased Paul's financial worries. A theory was floated that a rival pharmaceutical company set fire to ruin their reputation, but no evidence was presented to support it. Matt and Harry deduced that Valence Tech is a scam, but Randy is adamant about the vaccine's promise.
Randy. And Randy's one of the researchers, right?
He's the only researcher.
Oh, the only researcher.
Well, I guess Paul seemed like he was working for Liberty doing, I don't know if he was a researcher or not, but remember he found online evidence of like Randy's research, and so he pulled him into this startup. So Randy is the researcher.
And does Randy know it's all a scam?
I think that's part of the mystery. So the question for you and for all of our detectives is, who should Matt point the needle at to nip this bug in the butt?
So Randy would have to be a real dumbass to not realize that that's a condiment machine and not, a hypercolic converter or whatever it needs to be.
I would agree. If he really is a researcher, he would know the difference between a machine that put mayonnaise in food versus one that mixed pathogens.
Yeah. So I'd say he would have to be in on it at some level. If not, I don't know what he's actually doing there. For the substance to be that addictive,
Maybe
what's the point?
I don't know. That's a really good point. What is the point of making fake vaccines addictive?
Exactly. And it could be accidentally addictive, but why not just make a fake vaccine that isn't that addictive? He was trying to make really good results. Maybe it had to be addictive for the rats to provide those good results. Right?
With mayonnaise machines?
Well, the fake thing that they're creating.
Yeah.
If they're creating something fake and they needed fake good results, something that showed promise but wasn't actually, doing anything, maybe you need it to be addictive so the rats like it, or.
Yeah.
Um.
So Paul was the guy who came up with the idea for Valence Tech.
So Paul is real suspicious. People come knocking on his door, say we need to see results. And the fact of the matter is he doesn't have anything because the whole thing is a scam. It would make sense for him to burn down the whole operation, have to start from scratch. He could basically start the whole operation up again, continue scamming them, continue making all the money that he's making, and basically just have to do it again.
How about Alexa, the investment manager?
Oh, I don't remember who that was, to be honest.
She's the woman who basically is like selling it, trying to get people to invest in it. She's the woman who has the plane.
I remember so little about what she did
during the setup.
Yeah.
She was at the meeting with Paul and Randy when Paul told the two of them that Liberty wanted to see the results. And she then did some work and she was leaving for the plane when she saw the lab was on fire. So she was starting to contact people to start investing again, and she was even contacting Liberty's competitors.
I'm gonna say if it's her, I'm screwed because I didn't think she was that important of a character. She wasn't around very much.
Do you want me to make her red?
I don't know. Skip her for now.
Okay.
Paul to me is the. Wait, was it Paul?
Paul's the guy who founded it. Randy is the leading researcher.
I don't think Randy did it. Randy really likes what he was doing, apparently.
Okay.
I don't think the former employee. Don't mind the dogs. I don't think the former employee who quit because of the addiction stuff did it.
Okay.
I don't think Johnny Walker did it.
Okay.
Who does that leave us?
Paul. Paul is the only one. You said not Randy because you think he was really into his work. Not Alexa because she basically wasn't around enough.
Yeah. So did I just leave Paul and Alexa?
Well, you left Paul mostly, Randy kinda, and the rest of them.
No, I said it's not Randy.
Okay, then just Paul.
Just Paul. Huh.
You
all right.
Feeling Paul?
I'm slightly feeling Paul. He's got the most to lose out of all of this. Randy is a legitimate. I mean, Randy, I guess, could lose a lot. He was a legitimate researcher who, if it came out that he was in on the scam, even if he didn't know about it, he had to have known about it.
Yeah, I think your logic holds there. Like, how could the lead researcher not know about it?
Yeah. He had to know it was a scam.
I wonder if Alexa knew about it.
That's the thing. Despite the biggest reason why Alexa is a suspect is because even though she didn't know about it, she was getting away. She was escaping by getting in that plane and leaving. So yes, people might have been hurt, but she was out of there.
Well,
so
did she actually leave though? Because she said she saw the buildings burning as she was going to the plane.
Yeah, she could have been a remote detonation. It could have been anything. Did it say it was a match? Did it say in the story how the fire was started?
It said that there was accelerant placed at multiple locations so that it could be started from any of those locations.
Yeah.
I think it actually said with the strike of a match, but we don't know that was actually how it started.
I mean, if it was in a strike of a match, I don't think she could have started a fire and ran and gotten in a plane without anyone noticing. So I'm gonna say no, Alexis. If it is her, there's a plot hole that I plan on exposing, Ted.
Ed.
Ed. Why did I just call you
I
Ted?
don't
Oh,
know.
because your last name is Teja. That's why. I was like, I've never called you that before. All right, Ed. My bad.
All right, you got to commit to somebody.
All right. I guess we got to commit to Paul. He's the only guy that makes sense to me. Also, there's a chance, this just crossed my mind, that debris didn't hit Johnny Walker, but someone hit him across the head. Something about that seemed sketchy, but then, the two guys dragged him out, and Paul was one of the two guys, so that puts him in the right place at the right time to have done that as well. It's either Paul or Randy in my mind. Alexa couldn't have done it. The former employee wasn't even there, and apparently it's not too easy to get out of there if it's as remote as it is. So people would have probably caught her or seen someone leaving the scene. Johnny Walker exposed too much stuff for it to be him. I guess he could have done it, but what would he have gotten out of it?
Well, I mean, if he was just
other than sporting his values,
strongly anti-vaxxer, he just would have been taking it down.
He would have been, but by endangering others' lives by doing it, I don't think he's violent.
By endangering his own life.
He endangered his own life if he had done it. But the thing is that whoever did this was so desperate, they endangered like 3 people that were in there. 2 people were supposed to be in there, 1 wasn't. If multiple people did it, it was probably Paul and Randy, but I'm going to have to go with Paul on this one.
All right. In case y'all didn't notice, Mystery to Die For is still ad-free. You can thank us by supporting our authors. Ed Teja is hands down one of the most imaginative writers that we know. So check out his backlist on his website, Ed Teja, that's EDTEJA.com, and his newest thriller, Betrayal, meet Tina Clark, the world's first storefront assassin, and because she's a Tina, it's gotta be good. All right, Jack, let's go to laying out the facts. When we all settled down in their conference room with the trio of suspects across the big table from us, the array of "why am I here" looks on their faces, it pleased me. Alexa seemed upset. "Why are we here?" she asked. Somebody had to. Willa took point. "We're here because Matt wants to play a hunch concerning the identity of our firebug," she said. "Me and Harry? Well, we came for the show." Alexa tried scowling. "A hunch?" With the spotlight on me, it was too late for second-guessing myself. Naturally, I did it anyway. "A quick review," I said. "First, the background story. Paul Larson read Randy Klein's paper and thought his vaccine idea was worth pursuing. He was pretty sure Liberty would turn down the proposal." Paul nodded. "In this political climate, with the Wuhan lab leaking COVID and all." I shut him down with the wave. "Fine, we don't care. What's important is that you 3 formed Valence Tech LLC. You negotiated a deal with Liberty, and Alexa found investors." They nodded. So far, so good. "So life was good," I said, "except for the teeny fact that there was never any effort to make a vaccine." Alexa's head snapped back. "What?" Randy and Paul focused their attention on the ceiling as I gave her a cheerful smile. It was all a scam. Paul knew that Randy's research led nowhere, but seemed to think it would be fun and profitable to pretend it had potential. She gave me a blank look. "And how?" "Well, you found investors for this project, and they pocketed the money as it came in." Her head shook. "No, they drew salary," she said. "Nothing big." "But," I pointed, "they bought lots of expensive toys." Alexa turned pale. "Sure, they needed all that high-tech lab equipment, those fancy machines, and they cost a fortune. They brought them from Switzerland. They were necessary to produce the vaccine." I had to correct her. "They bought what was necessary to pretend to produce it. The equipment was made in El Paso and designed for manufacturing food products. You probably got a bogus receipts." She shot a look at Paul, who seemed to be somewhere else. Her lip curled into a snarl. "Is that true, Paul?" His face went pale. Okay, fine. We mocked up the gear. There is no vaccine and there never was. Alexa looked at him in disbelief. You conned me, and Liberty, and had me lie to investors. Then you expected me to find new investors? He seemed relieved. Of course. Finding a new backer would get you another cut, like it did the first time. It wasn't your money. Why do you care? Sheriff Willett cleared her throat. Seeing as this is fraud, I'm obliged to care, Mr. Larson. Alexa glared at Randy. It was your research. Why did you play along with this? He sneered. I was broke. Paul was paying me a salary, and that let me spend time exploring the idea. She looked apoplectic. I can never say that word. Apoplectic. With food manufacturing equipment? He sank into his chair and glared at Paul. Paul never believed in my work at all, but I was getting close. Paul snorted. Bullshit. I was, Randy shouted. I spent the scam money on running real tests and made real progress. Harry leaned across the table and stared at Randy. Given that your research is so important and needed funding, did you take money from someone else to torch the lab? After all, you weren't using it. Randy crossed his arms. At first, I played along with Paul's game because I knew word would get out. There might be someone to come along and pay me to jump ship, go do real research in a real lab. But Paul kept a tight lid on things. I began to understand. And if someone thought enough of your research to burn down the lab, to stop it, that might change things. Now Paul was doing the glaring. You burned it? I thought that idiot Walker did. I stood, my attention still on Randy, watching his response. No, Randy did it. He had it all set up. And then, when he saw Josh Walker snooping around, he thought it might be a good thing. He could count on Walker shouting to the world that he was investigating Liberty's secret vaccine project. He captured someone torching it on video. What a selling point. But when the fire raced out of control, when Walker got knocked out, he couldn't let him die. Randy gave me a firm look. No one was supposed to get hurt. Willett smiled. So your story is that you two were scamming everyone, and that suited Paul Larson, but you weren't getting what you wanted from the deal, someone investing in real research. So you wanted it to seem that someone thought you were onto something good, so good that they were willing to do whatever it took to stop you. Randy raised his eyebrows. That's an interesting theory, and that's all it is. Paul rubbed his face. You idiot! We were doing so well, and the machines, we could have sold them again. I always found different perspectives interesting. Paul Larson was pleased with getting out of research and finding a sweet scam. Randy didn't actually care about the money. Randy didn't actually care about the money unless it validated his research. Alexa didn't care enough about a vaccine to look closely at anything but the bottom line. Sheriff Willis stood up, holding handcuffs. Well, you people do play some interesting games. I'll need to chat with the DA, but I expect that because you set the fire, Randy, you might be facing assault charges as well as arson, property damage, and fraud beefs. Paul Larson stood looking toward the door. The sheriff glared at him and slowly shook her head. Where do you think you're going? Paul looked confused for a moment. I didn't set the fire. No, you didn't, but you perpetrated a major fraud, she said. That's a big-time felony. She glanced at Alexa. I'll be in touch with the FBI. You best have all the accounts on my desk by morning. I'll have a warrant out for accessory charges. She took out her phone. I'm calling the accountant now. Harry stood and stretched. He wore a big smile. You earned your pay, Matt. How about I buy you dinner? You too, Sheriff. Bring your husband. The insurance company can afford it. Busy cuffing her suspects, Willa gave Harry a wink. I appreciate the offer, but I'm facing a long evening of unenviable paperwork, she said. Maybe another time. As we filtered out of the building, I stopped to stare at Alexis Plain. She had been surprised at the turn of events, but didn't seem too concerned. What are your investors going to say when they see this on the news? I asked. She lit a cigarette and gave me a grim grin. Oh, they'll be pissed. And maybe sue because I didn't do due diligence. I'll be on their shit list for a time. Till I come up with a project that makes everyone a pile of money. Then all will be forgiven. For once, I was glad to be a private investigator. I didn't see her world as a fun place to live. After she flew off, I was happy to join Harry for a steak dinner in Deming. We'd have a meal, drink beer, and talk about how Randy Klein and Paul Larson shot Liberty's Valence in the foot. The end.
Damn it.
You were close. You were so close.
Yeah, Yeah. Damn it. First one of the season, man. First one of the season.
I think this was kind of sophisticated in the sense that they were both scam artists.
They were both scammers. They both had equal opportunity to have committed the crime. You know, there was no, like, Alexis couldn't have done it because she wasn't there. Really, it was only 3 suspects because there was only 3 people around, and Alexis wasn't there for it. Between Randy and Paul, it was more just who had more to lose.
It kind of was.
And the thing is, they both had a lot to lose. You know,
I don't think we fully realized where Randy's head was.
Yeah, it didn't. You got the sense that he liked what he did. Mm-hmm. You didn't get the sense that he lived on what he did.
Yeah.
That, you know, he would die for this, you know, thing he did. He only talks about it once. And yeah, he goes into depth about it and he clearly loves it, but that was the first and last instance you get that this is, you know, his entire life. He would kill for this. He will go to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, I think with Paul, since it was a scam to him, he was just going to roll on to the next mark.
Yeah.
And so the loss really set him back. It messed with his plans.
I guess the one thing I could have caught on to was that I was thinking that Paul had nowhere to go, but he was moving on. He was moving on with Alexis and finding new investors.
Yeah.
He did not hit the end of the road. I guess I kind of imagined if they were demanding answers, he'd have to give them instead of, you know, just forget them and move on to someone else.
Yeah, he came to the fork in the road and just went the other direction.
Yeah. Which, I don't know, I guess I just didn't understand the story in that regard. And that wasn't I missed it. It was I misinterpreted it. But yeah. No, it was a good one.
So
that was definitely difficult.
Yeah. For those of you who are new to Ed Teja, he is a full-time writer and part-time martial arts instructor. His stories, which have little or no respect for genre and take place in one or more of the surreal worlds he lives in, have appeared in variety magazines and anthologies. His new thriller series about Tina Clark, the world's first storefront assassin, is available on Amazon. Links are on the show notes to his book, to his website, as well as his socials on BookBub and X. So, Jack, you know, I was going round and round about what to do at the end of these as far as, like, you know, the witty banner, interesting stuff that we've always done.
Yeah.
So I did a little research. This is actually a case of insurance fraud, but I didn't want to put that as the crime because I thought it would point you too easily to what was going on. And it was arson, so I didn't lie. So I looked up arson-flavored insurance frauds.
Well, okay, also the thing is that it's more arson than insurance fraud, because if it was insurance fraud, that's more what Paul did. Like, that was a big thing Paul did. Randy wasn't in it for the insurance fraud. He was in it for the research. And he committed the arson itself. And
you make a good point. You could even argue it wasn't quite insurance fraud because none of the 3 of them were benefiting from the insurance.
Exactly.
So it's arson.
It's arson.
But let's talk about arson-flavored insurance fraud. It's not just for Ed's stories. It's a favorite get-rich-quick scheme for all artists. So the basic idea is to take out insurance on property in a way that the money you receive is, in the payout, is more than you invested, right? Simple economics. get out more than you put in. So take the 2018 case of Tyler Chen and his wife Kim and Ha Huynh. According to the California Department of Insurance, the Chens, as well as their co-conspirator, scammed 5 insurance companies out of over $4 million in a complicated scheme that began with fried chicken. Cooking dinner one night, the Chans became distracted, and the unsupervised fryer flew the coop. The fire and resulting smoke damaged their possessions, and so a claim was made and paid. But Chen and his wife were no Colonel Sanders, and different house, new stuff, and the fried chicken again got out of control. More smoke and fire damage. Another insurance claim, different company, was filed and paid. Between December 2011 and January 2014, residences, warehouses, and businesses received the Chen treatment. In all, claims totaled $5,653,655, and $4,009,008 was paid out by the 5 victim insurance companies. A tip in 2014 started the investigation that unraveled the scheme, including the use of fire-damaged goods multiple times and claiming goods that had been purchased but never received. In November 2019, Tyler Chen pleaded guilty to arson, and aggravated white-collar crime enhancement, and insurance fraud. He received 13 years. Huynh received 8 years for his role, and Chen's wife received 1 year for insurance fraud. The 3 were ordered to pay $582,506.36 in restitution. There's links in the show notes to the California Department of Insurance's press releases on the case. So yeah, chicken. Started with chicken. You're never supposed to fry chicken and leave it unattended.
You're really not.
That wraps up this episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support our show by subscribing, telling a mystery lover about us, and giving us a 5-star review. Check out our new website. That is right. Mysteries to Die For has graduated from being part of my writer website to our own standalone website. It's m2d4podcast.com. It has all the links to this season's authors, as well as the past seasons, our anthologies, and you can see what Jack and I actually look like. Mysteries to Die For is hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. Who Shot Liberty's Valence was written by Ed Teja. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for a toe tag, which is the first chapter from a fresh release in mystery, crime, or thriller genre, and then come back in 2 weeks for our next original story where dog napping is the featured murderless crime. It's Going to the Dogs by Bonner Spring. All right, Jack, take us out.